Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, one is star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. It is a perfect day.
Woke up to the sound of the garbage truck again. Upstairs neighbor's toilet's leaking on my head. And cars broke down, I missed the bus, there runs a 10. I had a feeling this was a day to stay in bed. I finally left my pad right on the jumbo's cloud roof. A police officer pulled out his gun and said, I said, sir, you got the wrong guy. I guess it's just a perfect day. It's just a perfect day. Na, 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 na,
Hey guys, welcome to another great episode of Eggs. Today we have a special guest. Our guest is Lance Graulich. Lance is the founder and CEO of Ion Franchising, an industry-leading franchise consulting and development group. He represents over 500 franchise brands and business opportunities within 90 different categories. Lance helps prospective entrepreneurs find their perfect franchise at no cost to them. In our conversation today, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of franchising, why someone should engage a franchise consultant, and to dispel the myth that you have to be rich to get into franchising. Join us in welcoming our guest, Lance Graulich.
Hey, Lance, how are you? Thanks for doing the show, man. We are really grateful for your time and willingness to come on board and do the show with us today. We're grateful to meet you and glad to talk to you.
Thanks, Ryan. Thank you very much for having me, and Mike as well. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm actually excited about the topic. We haven't had anyone that's covered any type of franchising before, so it's something that I've always thought about but never really kind of done any research on, so I'm excited to have you as a guest.
It's always good to be first.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic. This is something that I've thought about over the many years. I've thought about getting into different franchises and things like that, but I don't understand the process at all. And so I think that this will be really great. So Lance, as we mentioned at the top, is Lance Graulich. He's the founder and CEO of Ion Franchising. And basically they're a franchise consulting and development organization that helps people get into franchises. So let's dig in a little bit, but let's start first maybe by talking a little bit about your background, who you are, where you're from, and how you got into this line of work.
Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, although I live in Las Vegas now and have for many years. The reason it's important where I originate from is, immigrant family. Both grandfathers were incredibly successful entrepreneurs. And, money was talked about in my household when I was young. And I got interested in an early age in understanding, how to make money, how to be successful. And, I was always told by my family, work for somebody else in the beginning, get an understanding of life and work hard and then branch off on your own. So that's initially what I did. My dad was, he was a partner in a big over-the-counter trading house on Wall Street. So I started working there throughout the summers. And then when I got out of college, I thought for sure I was going to work for Dad. And I changed gears real quickly, abruptly, because working in New York City, working in the trading room, while there was some level of excitement, I was still bored. I needed some people interaction. So, I'm young. New York's crazy. I've been here my whole life, although most people love to go to New York. I said, let me try something different. And I got a call from a pseudo uncle, a good friend of the family, who made his money in one business and decided he was going to build a big restaurant franchise. So he recruited me through my uncle. Hey, come work for me at this TGI Fridays franchise. We're going to buy 4 TGI Fridays. And I heard you worked in bars and restaurants throughout college, and which, by the way, a little side story that I think is important. My family education was very important. There was no option of whether I was going to college or not. It was, you are going to college. You are going to get a degree, preferably in business or medicine. My brother became a doctor. my sister's a teacher. She's got her master's, which my mom was a school principal. So that fit and that was approved. And, but my parents really wanted us to be successful. Now, success isn't determined by the amount of dollar signs attached to your paycheck or your wealth, but it's, obviously being happy and being able to take care of your lifestyle. Some people have different lifestyles. I don't need a plane. I'm okay with not having a plane. So, but the interesting thing was I was in college, and I don't know if you guys remember, I'm older than you guys, but in the old days before online banking, I remember I shared a joint checking account with my mother. Again, they wanted me to be successful in college, focus on my studies, in for 4 years and out. And my mom looked at my checking account or listened to it over the phone, whatever they did in the old days, and found there was more money than she thought. So she calls me and she goes, "Why are you putting money in your bank account? How is that even possible? You have so much more money." I said, "Ma, I got a job." And she goes, "You can't get a job." I said, what do you mean I can't get a job? And I started working in bars and restaurants, and I loved it. I loved the energy. I loved the excitement. I loved that it was complicated. You're dealing with a lot of people. You're dealing with, theft and waste and overpouring behind the bar and bouncers that don't listen and let people in, So I loved it. By the time I was a senior, I had kind of administrative rights in this bar chain and learned at a really young age. This is pretty cool. But nevertheless, back to where I was in the story, I graduated college, worked for Dad on Wall Street for a little bit. Crazy pseudo Uncle Steven called me, joined me in the TGI Fridays world. And from those 4 TGI Fridays restaurants, we built an empire. 225 million a year after 5 years is what our sales were. Now,
wow, that's incredible.
That was through acquisitions. We acquired a lot of other TGI Fridays that weren't doing as well. There was opportunities to, acquire those in addition to building many, many more. So let's call it my MBA, although I do have an economics degree. Let's call it my MBA in restaurants and franchising at that stage, because I learned a ton. And then I came back to Vegas and really got into consulting for a minute. And what is consulting? Typically, you're in between jobs or don't know what to do next. And I wanted to use those skills at TGI Fridays. They told us when we went through training, look, at Fridays, you now know more than 99% of restaurateurs in America, because their training was that intense and that, thorough and comprehensive. So loved what I learned. And, I remember calling my dad one day and, after I had a couple little restaurant executive type roles and I hated the bosses or the owners I worked with. And my dad said, "Well, it's possible you're unemployable like your grandfathers and you need to do your own thing."
I have the same problem.
There you go. We've us hard chargers, we've been told that a time or two.
Yeah.
So I realized, I need to start looking for my own thing. I did become a food and beverage director and opened a big hotel in Vegas. Had a lot of responsibility and loved that. But that was also because a mentor of mine from the TGI Fridays days was the VP of food and beverage. So he called me when he hit Vegas and said, "Hey, need you over here." So I became his director and had an amazing time doing that. And he left and I took the helm for a period of time. And I was like, new owners of the casino came in, this transition thing. And I said, this is crap. I don't want to be, beholden to who is my next boss and am I going to even like him or her? So I was like, all right, that's it. And I eventually had a family friend that became a Krispy Kreme donuts franchisee in Las Vegas. He was from New York, like my family. He knew some relatives of mine that became the first franchisee of Krispy Kreme in New York City. And he couldn't hire me at that time because Krispy Kreme wasn't what Krispy Kreme became. It wasn't this high volume donut shop that a lot of people know today. It was kind of this little double drive-through thing from the Southeast, the Carolinas. And so he and I stayed in touch. He opened his first store. I kind of consulted and helped him on that. And then he realized, I need you. You have to come join me. And I did. And we scaled it. We had Nevada and Utah. I had a nice piece of equity. And we scaled that from the one store that he had to many, and 25 million in sales, selling donuts. And It was absolutely an incredible, incredible experience. So, that's what gave me a real taste between Fridays and Krispy Kreme. And then eventually after, I was done there, if you will, and I did everything I possibly could, built my dream house. Fortunately, that was with my ex-wife. That's a whole other show. But I said, well, what's next? What's next for me? And I called some friends that were much older than me and hopefully wiser. And I put an investment group together and became a franchisee of Wingstop. And this is before a lot of people really knew Wingstop. I certainly wasn't the first or second or even 10th franchisee. It had been more established. But that's the thing with franchises. Some franchises can be around for years before they really have national prominence and awareness. But on a regional basis, if you can get to a franchise that is, let's say, established in North Carolina, like Krispy Kreme, and build in that, close to home, you really, from a marketing perspective, as you guys would know with your experience, from a marketing perspective, there's awareness in that regional area, which is really helpful for launching. But I opened my first Wingstop. I only did $5,000 a week in sales for a little 1,400 square foot wing shop, which is pretty terrible. And by the time I opened the fourth store, it was like $35,000 a week was the opening. So, I had some self-induced pains with partners. Like I said, self-induced. You make certain mistakes when you put a capital group together. Many people make that mistake. I certainly did. And I ended up selling prematurely. I would have loved to hold on to them, but we were fighting about things in our agreements. The attorney would advise different things and said, look, you can fight them, but they have more money than you, or you could just sell and move on and just do something again. And so, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'll just sell and move on. But I was president of the Franchise Advisory Council for Wingstop. I was one of the top franchisees of Wingstop and Krispy Kreme at TGI Fridays. I kind of have that gene, call it the attention to detail and the work ethic. And I certainly know how to manage my people. But these are skills that I think in some cases I was born with, but learned how to really harness. So I'll take a breath and relax for a moment.
Perfect. I wanted to actually ask you, kind of step back a little bit.
Sure.
Where you went to school, and if you thought that the education you got from school played more of a role in where you are today, or your actual life experience that you built through working through TGI Fridays and those companies. Because I know they have kind of a training program that you go through when you do become a franchisee. They'd send you off to a camp for a week or two, right? And then train you how to run the business and train you how to manage everything. So do you think your education played more of a role, or their training played more of a role in your
I can certainly tell you that I believe there's always a place for education, but it has to be something you're focused on. I remember in college, my life was, and still is, I love everything business related, whether it's marketing, whether it's management, whether it's organizational development and design. Everything business is me. Accounting was in my initial major. And then I said, well, wait a second. That's a little too much in the numbers here. I love it, but I'm not going to focus on this my entire life. I could hire a CPA. So the shorter answer is I think my education absolutely helped. I did have some great professors that did have some good real life experience that I really learned from. There were many classes I took, probably more than half, that do nothing for me. They were essentially worthless. They were electives maybe I had to take, or, whatever. But I can tell you at TGI Fridays specifically, their training program was incredible, as I mentioned. And basically what you had to do was go through, as a manager, it was really a 6-month training program. 6 months. But they were smart. They used common sense. They took into account, like I had bartended in college. So they took those skills, kind of confirmed what I did know and didn't, and filled in the blanks. So instead of spending a month behind the bar in TGI Fridays bartender training, it was a week. Yeah. So I shortcutted. I think my entire management training at TGI Fridays was probably 2.5 months. It was just under 3 months. So I cut quite a bit out. But look, I know today there's a lot of people that are down on traditional college. It is certainly not necessary. What I worry about is people that are more lazy than anything, not so much ambitious, that say, well, I don't really need college. I've actually heard people say to me, I really want to be a doctor, but I don't want to go to college for 8 years. And if you and I, Mike and Ryan, surveyed these people 8 years after they said that and what they were doing, I guarantee you it's generally not something productive. And they could have found the 8 years to go to college and figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's true. And it is controversial, this topic of education and how important it is. You weigh out the debts we accrue versus the money we'll make and all that kind of stuff. And so, but I do think for, certain careers, and also to your point, just sort of about ambition in general, some of your career or some of your life or the reason for college is a little bit of just hoop jumping, kind of showing that you have the dexterity to do it.
Absolutely.
And, for, I think so many people too, you're right, do just sort of discount education by just saying, well, it's not for me, I don't want to do it. But it's not because they have some other grand plan.
Right.
Most people that you see, or at least many of them that you see that have gone on to be successful without college, typically started college, but their ambition outgrew their education. So they split and moved on to something
Absolutely.
else. They don't
So
typically
true.
just not start. So.
Absolutely true.
So, franchising, can you give us kind of a brief overview of what it is, how people become involved in it? There's usually a buy-in. How many brands do you represent, and what does your business do in the process? Are you just a consultant, or do you make the connections for people?
So it's an interesting process. And as Ryan mentioned earlier, there are, in fact, so many misconceptions. And I'm glad you hit right on it, Ryan, earlier. So many misconceptions about franchising. And I think part of that is because when people think of franchising, what do they typically think of? McDonald's. They think of the big, really expensive restaurant franchises. And there's plenty of those. So over the years, as I got in and out of my franchise businesses, I had quite a few consulting gigs where I get paid quite a bit of money and get put on retainer to help brands on their operations, in addition to, training, anything that it takes that I can see. And I always ask my clients permission, and I did in those days. Well, Ryan and Mike, I know you hired me for this, this, and this, but do you mind if I be honest with you and share with you everything that I see that is impacting your bottom line? And of course, every owner shakes their head like you. Oh, by all means. And, in some cases, they could have a brother or sister or wife or daughter that's running a big significant piece of the business that could be hampering the business, which is why I also asked that. You see that a lot in mom and pops and franchise businesses. So I started mentoring franchisors, young emerging brands. And I did that quite a bit. And then from there, it became, well, can you help us sell franchises? We hired this other guy and he doesn't seem to know what he's doing, or in the old days before lead generation and the internet, you needed somebody with a big fat Rolodex, or somebody that was going to show up and, set up shop at a franchise convention. I mean, how else would you know? And, but I started helping people 15 years ago with their brands on the sales and development side, the growth side. And, so that was my evolution. And over time, before you know it, I was representing about 20 brands and 30 brands. And then I realized that several years ago, I need to join one of these bigger brokerages and consulting groups where I can still do what I do and when I want to do it. So I'm not necessarily beholden to a full-time gig. I am essentially a 1099 or a consultant that works for other big brokerages. So I've brokered deals and I've amassed more brands in America than anybody. I have close to 600 brands right now, about 150 in the restaurant franchise world, and everything else in every other category imaginable. And here's a fun fact for you guys. I have about 5 pages of information, not in front of me, but it documents about 400 different line items in the franchise world. Not so much categories. I mean, as far as major categories, you got, automotive brands like Meineke and Amco and Mako and, Grease Monkeys and Oil Change Thing, down to home healthcare. I have 30 of those. To fitness, I have another 30 of those, or whatever it might be. But we're talking like 400 different line items, so many different franchises I could possibly show you. So for me, I realized that, a lot of franchise consultants weren't experienced and knowledgeable like I was. I made a lot of mistakes, but I was an incredibly successful franchisee. I could, the owners of Wingstop sold and made a fortune, sold out to Rourke Capital, and which is a huge private equity group. And now they have another brand, and I'm helping with that brand. Same guys that are much older than me. And, they're asking me if I want to be the franchisee for Vegas for them for this new brand, because why not? They know I'm going to be successful, doing it. So, but franchising, look, I was taught at a young age because my dad was on Wall Street. At Wall Street, and investing in stocks and bonds is an amazing way to build wealth over time. I learned from one of my grandfathers, who was an incredibly successful real estate attorney. I learned from him that, buying buildings like Monopoly, except with real cash, you can be really successful with that. So aren't those two of the largest pillars of growth and wealth in the United States? Absolutely. Well, the third piece to me is the franchise world. And if you look at the evidence, private equity groups today are buying more franchise brands than ever, because they understand. I mean, years ago, I don't know if Warren Buffett is still into franchising, but Warren Buffett owned quite a few franchises. Kevin Harrington, the original shark from Shark Tank, I was with his attorney the other day, and we're doing quite a few things together. Kevin's got his hand in quite a few franchise brands, young emerging brands. You get them young and you scale them across the country, and either you take the exit strategy of a private equity group or keep it private if you choose to. So hopefully I answered all that. I don't know if I missed something, Mike.
Yeah, it's interesting. I believe it's Shaquille O'Neal, but like a big part of his wealth post NBA is franchising.
Absolutely.
I think he owns something like 45 Guys restaurants or something.
Yeah, there's quite a few celebrities, Ryan, that are exactly like that. And now let's talk about why. Because in the franchise world, anybody can get into any franchise regardless of their past experiences. However, just like anything, franchisors, the company that is licensing the franchise to you, they want to ensure that you are of great character. So what does that mean? Do you have good credit? Do you have the capital? Do you have some skills based on your past successes, whether you went to college? Regardless, what is your resume? What does it show that Ryan and Mike have done that translates to the fact that they can run this hair salon franchise? Whether you know how to cut hair or not. And let me digress into a story that's apropos. I have a family friend that owns 19 major hair salons that are franchised, 19. He doesn't even have hair. He's never cut hair a day in his life.
So I want to actually ask you about that, because, the Shaquille O'Neals that have 45 guys and your family member who's never cut hair, how involved do you have to be in the actual day-to-day operations of a franchise if you just are doing it as an investment but don't necessarily want to get into the auto part industry yourself?
Right.
I mean, isn't that counterintuitive? Don't you want to be hands-on and working it full-time? I'm sure initially you kind of have to, but is there a way to approach a franchise as a hands-off investment?
Absolutely. And that is the beauty of franchising today more than ever. When technology really got big, first of all, there were a lot of new brands that came out or scaled quicker because now they have technology on their side. Things like local SEO that didn't exist before. Local SEO was what before? The yellow pages.
Yeah. And I actually had ads in the yellow pages back in the day, and I never recouped my money. So it's like I've been doing it long enough where I've done both, and the digital and the personal referrals is where I got most of my business. But
Mike, did you play the game I used to with the yellow pages ads and put a completely different phone number only in that yellow pages ad? So you knew if people called you, you got it from that ad.
No, I didn't, but I put it in 3 different yellow pages in the market that I was trying to hit. And it just, I think it was the wrong time because it was when the internet was starting to come out and I just timed it wrong. So instead of, anyways. timing is everything. That has a lot to do with luck, is your timing, So the beauty of franchising is, let's walk through the models or the parts to the model. And this is all part of my first call with prospective franchisees, clients. The first question I ask is, are you planning to be the owner operator? Obviously the owner. Are you going to be the operator? So there are many brands that you have to be an owner operator. The brand does not want to hear in the first phone call when I connect you to them, because really I am a referral agent. So while I am a franchise consultant, I am a referral agent where I am referring people to various brands, and I'm playing matchmaker to determine, based on your skills, what brands you are most compatible with. And by the way, I do have a free assessment on my website, which we could talk about later, that puts more of the science into it. And it spits out some amazing information. I had an attorney take it the other day. I have many people take it. And he called me right away. He goes, "This is unbelievable." Like, I can't believe how it, and what he doesn't see on my end is I actually get suggested brands based on how he answered that. And it has to do with also your mindset, which is a whole other conversation we can get into. And, because fear, hurts a lot of people in this process. They get really, nervous. But so to fully answer where you were with this, Mike, are you going to be the operator, which is really full-time gig? Are you going to be sort of a semi-absentee owner? So let's just say you can hire a manager. I'll give you an example. Most of my restaurant franchises, I represent the young emerging brand in Atlanta, a cheesesteak brand that's one of the hottest things I've ever seen in the country. And through the pandemic, by the way, they lost no business, 0.
Oh, wow.
And they're in downtown Atlanta where there's colleges and all these businesses. And they lost, not only did they not lose any business through the pandemic, they actually gained business on certain days, because they called me and couldn't believe all of their efforts by promoting and giving away free food to hospitals and healthcare workers worked. And they weren't looking for press. They were just looking to do the right thing, and they felt good about it. But in the case of restaurants, if you don't want to do it full time, you just need to make sure that you have people that will go to training, complete the 2 weeks of restaurant training outside your market. So if you're going to open one of these cheesesteak brands, you're going to have to go to Atlanta for 2 weeks with at least one person, maybe 2. And you have to have a certified operator in the building at all times, supervising your staff. Now, those certified operators can certify another person because they've been certified. And then when someone from corporate comes in, and this works like this, with, generally speaking, with any other franchises, in the restaurant segment especially, where you have a corporate inspection post-opening, they're going to just, give you an audit, if you will, and they want to know what it is that you guys are doing right. Sadly, catch you doing things wrong, but they want you to improve and not have bad customer experiences. Serve the food the exact way that you were taught. And if your staff is doing all that, what do you think they do? They leave you alone.
Yeah.
Keep doing more of that, And, so it's, you can be an owner-operator, a semi-absentee owner, but then you have the executive level or the fully absentee type owner. We have brands that you can be 100% an absentee owner. We have salons. We have restaurants. We have a restaurant chain that's doing incredibly well, and they created a new program called the Sherpa program, which gives you an expert that they've trained and certified that will run your restaurant for you. And you really pay a management fee for them to do that, but you don't have to worry about it. Now, at some point, your life changes where you want to be in your restaurant full time and take the reins. You can do that. I think it's a commitment of 6 months at a time, exactly, is what they're doing for the Sherpa that will run your restaurant and all that. So it just really depends. It depends on what you're looking for. We have plenty of absentee-owned scenarios that work incredibly well. And a lot of people forget about the financial ramifications of having a business. When people are used to being a W-2 employee and making, let's say, $75,000 a year, and they end up owning their own business, what do you think the conversation's like? Well, I need to replace my $75,000 a year. And I laugh because what I learned when I had my first, franchise is I was starting to pull out money and, taking a draw, not so much a regular salary at the time. And I remember calling my accountant, my CPA, and saying, Anthony, I'm pulling out all this money. You said something about quarterly taxes. What do I, what do I need to do? And he goes, nothing. So what do you mean nothing? He goes, you're not going to pay any federal tax this year. I said, I'm sorry. He said, well, in the restaurant business, you have all these depreciable, assets and all these expenses. So that'll offset your income. So you don't have to worry at all about taxes this year. I was like, wow, I love being my own boss. So I could make, let's say I was looking for 75,000. I could pull the same 75,000 with no taxes. That's a substantial pay raise to where I was before, not to mention other things that I can claim now as well. So I get into it deep with all of my candidates on so many different pieces of the puzzle that they might not even think of to get them really ready.
Yeah, so maybe it makes sense to kind of go back a little bit and just discuss the why. Like, so why might somebody choose a franchise versus just maybe into going into business on their own?
Question of the week always is the biggest question, and the answer is the failure rate. That's one piece. The ramp up, the security, and the know-how. When you get into a franchise, number one, you're going to get a proven brand. Number two, you're going to have some sort of brand awareness, and you're going to get established training program. You are going to get ongoing support and coaching and mentoring, not like working with your spouse or your brother where you tell each other what you want to hear and you just start fighting it about, you don't have anybody really telling you as a mentor what the truth is. Buying power, vendor relationships, all of these things are huge when it comes to franchising. Ease of exit and selling. When you sell a franchise, you can sell a franchise. The going rate these days is 3 to 5 times your cash flow, your EBITDA number, your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. That cash flow number, multiples. So you're making money in a franchise. You have income derived from the business, and you have equity you're building by building your cash flow, and then you're selling at a multiple. Let's see, the last couple of pieces, let me think real quick. Marketing, advertising, PR support. Someone else has created the kit, if you will. Now, remember, when you're getting into a franchise, this is one of my favorite parts. Nobody's putting a gun to your head. So if I had a lady the other day recently, within 6 weeks, she already made a decision and signed an agreement to join a salon chain I referred her to. When in her first call, she had no idea she wanted a salon chain. She said, Lance, whatever you think matches me best. And the wonderful part about it is she was ready to go. She had the training. She had a comfort level with the owner of the company. And the biggest piece of franchising is validation. That was my point in bringing her up, is validation. She was mandated by the franchisor, Beverly, you're wonderful. We love you. I need you to call 3 to 5 franchisees, and I need you to get validation from them. Ask them whatever you want. She did, and what do you think she came back with? They love it. They do it all over again. They're making money. They feel supported. They think the marketing's great. So again, nobody pushed you into it. While I suggested it, this is kind of the final piece. And then the other thing is R&D, ongoing research and development. Companies like McDonald's, as you guys probably know, and I use McDonald's a lot as an example because everybody knows it. The filet of fish, the Big Mac, those weren't things created by corporate. the mastermind group, if you will, the franchisees created those items. And if you're on your own and you're McDowell's, remember that movie?
Yeah.
You know, McDowell's doesn't come up with the fillet of fish because McDowell's doesn't have a mastermind group known as franchisees. You know, Big Mac would never be invented. So the sum total, you know, when I was at Wingstop, our franchise advisory council that I was president of, it guided the company. So franchisees could call us or email us and say, look, Lance, I know you have a meeting coming up. I'm really having problems with X, Y, and Z. And I got it done. I got it handled. I was their spokesperson. I was their congressman or senator, if you will, or whatever it might be. I was their representation. So if you choose not to buy a franchise, you can be successful. But the likelihood of putting that together on your own is incredibly difficult, and the odds are completely stacked against you. Now, keep in mind one other thing that you guys might be thinking. How do franchises even start? Well, the answer to that is so many franchises started like college hunks hauling junk and moving. A brand in my portfolio. Pardon me. You know, a lot of moving companies or junk removal companies simply are started by mom and pops, right? You just need a truck. You need some sort of know-how. You'll figure it out. But when technology came about, college hunks now refers an enormous amount of their business to their franchisees, either from their call center or because of their massive SEO and marketing efforts. And how does a mom and pop compete with that? It's incredibly difficult. Tough. So in most markets, it's incredibly difficult to compete with franchise brands because of that. The strength of the brand, the franchisor needs to make sure the franchisees are successful. Why? Because when the validation stage comes around and you don't have proper validation and a prospective franchisee says, I'm choosing A instead of B, you know, that franchise has some, you know, problems.
So,
go ahead, Mike.
I was going to ask, while we're on the topic of markets, how important is it to choose the correct market and not invest in an area that's not going to work? I actually have personal experience with this. I used to own a cell phone store, and I picked a market that was bad. And
why was it bad? Why do you say it was bad?
It was a small city. The overhead was low, but it was a seasonal market, and the sales were in the fall. They dropped off. It was a farming community.
Washington State, possibly, where you're from?
Idaho.
Idaho, okay.
Yeah, and a lot of it was the fact that I was young. I didn't really account with that. The technology was changing, and I ended up shuttering the doors because I hit this window where sales dropped, technology changed, my past inventory was outdated, but I couldn't buy new inventory until it was the perfect storm of inexperience, not knowing what I was doing, and it was just a bad experience all around. And so I've always been hesitant to try and do something like that again, or get into something like that, because of, you know, how burned I was. But I couldn't help but think at the time was, if I went to, you know, Phoenix and opened a Cricket store, how different it would have been versus this regional cell phone store in Idaho.
You know, you bring up a really, really good point, and I'll answer it this way. A prospective franchisee certainly needs to take responsibility to be the expert in their own market. So if you had lived there your whole life, as an example, these would be appropriate questions to ask the franchisor when you were in your due diligence phase, in the discovery phase. Because any process with a franchisor is many, many steps. It starts with one phone call, becomes a second phone call. Nowadays, they're doing virtual discovery days still because of COVID-19. But nevertheless, at some point when you ask that question, you could ask that questions that you're most concerned about over and over again to different executives or folks from that franchisor. and see if the answers are consistently the same or possibly different, where you potentially find some red flags. Now, what I will tell you is some of the best franchisors, I'll give you a perfect example. Restoration brands. They come to mind because their due diligence is pretty hefty. So I'll give you an example. I have a restoration brand. Now, restoration, if there is a flood or a fire or mold remediation, or there was a hurricane or storm damage, whatever it might be, that's what these restoration brands do. You've seen their trucks everywhere, but you can imagine they're more prevalent in certain markets than others. Vegas, we don't have a lot of floods. We don't have a lot of that. So certain brands I represent are not interested in coming to Vegas at all. So my point is, instead of taking somebody's money and letting them become a franchisee in this market, and maybe they will do okay because maybe they're dealing with mold remediation or whatever, more than anything, or fire damage. Somebody has a fire, maybe they become the number one in fire damage. There are some brands that have the utmost of integrity and will not let you open in certain markets, or based on population. Maybe the population's too low. But on the flip side of that, I have restaurant brands that don't want to go after the big markets where the big boys play. They don't want to go to LA and New York and Chicago. They want to go to, or Phoenix. They want to go to like Oklahoma. They want to go to, Idaho. They don't even necessarily want to go to Salt Lake yet, but they want to be in secondary markets. Why? The rents are typically lower. There's usually fewer restaurants per capita because some of the big chains maybe haven't infiltrated as of yet. So the long answer to your question, though, Mike, is simply you got to find the right brand and you got to ask great questions. The best brands will not take you on if they even think that you're going to fail. And let me give you a stock market analogy to exactly what we're talking about. My dad's license plate was blue chip. Blue chip stocks are the best stocks out there. Johnson & Johnson and, all the big players, IBM and all these big companies. And those are blue chip stocks. Speculative stocks are the smaller ones, the smaller companies, small caps and even smaller than that. Pink sheets are the most incredibly risky stocks there are. Well, in franchising, it's the same. There are the blue chip brands that you can invest in. One blue chip brand that I represent comes to mind, Fast Signs. Fast Signs is one of the most successful, well-known brands there is. I have many others just like that. And then there's other brands. Maybe there's another company that has one or two locations. That's still speculative and emerging. Nothing guarantees your success because you're operating this. You're choosing to follow their model or not follow their model. And even if a single unit, my cheesesteak brand in downtown Atlanta, they have one location, but they've been around for a long time. They had a previous location they didn't like anymore, but it was still successful. But they've been around like 5 years. And their Instagram is verified. 200,000 followers on their Instagram for a single unit. 7 million people that follow their posts. So I've had people ask me, but they're only one. How are they going to find out about it? Well, we just did a Instagram post, weeks ago for a new location coming to Florida. They had 18,000 likes within 3 days for the Florida location. You think anybody will find you? So these are the distinct differences when you're looking at a small emerging brand like I just described or a blue chip brand. Nevertheless, the questions are still similar for you to have your comfort level. At the end of the day, mindset is everything in this process. I have some people, I had an anesthesiologist, very successful doctor referred to me, called me the other day. Do you know what he said to me within this conversation? He said, yeah, my wife, who's also a doctor, said that I should not waste my time because I will never be a good business owner. Wow. That was his wife.
Yeah.
And, that's what some people are working with, so to speak. If you have people closest to you that are negative, and a lot of us do, most of us do. Oh, you shouldn't do that. Why would you waste your time? You don't even get up early in the morning. You can't do that. Well, that's what we have to deal with. So mindset is the first thing that I tackle, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually a great little bit of advice. So one of the things I want to talk about that sort of maybe dovetails into this conversation that we've just had, sort of given Mike's experience and, versus the blue chip type experience. Because I mean, obviously for most franchises or any franchise worth their salt, they're not looking to fail. So they're trying to do what they can to make sure they're successful. I mean, do you have to be a rich guy to get into this though? Like, I mean, it sounds like we're discussing a spectrum of things, so you've got McDonald's maybe on the high end, but there's probably lots of little unheard of, unnamed kind of things.
Let me give
maybe you could be a little cheaper.
Yeah. Let me give you two examples that come to mind that I have tons. The very first franchisee of Wingstop didn't have a lot of money. Remember what I just said, the first franchisee of Wingstop, number one. And he just fell in love with the brand, and he didn't have a lot of money. And within X period of time, I think it was 7-8 months, he was going to go out of business. If he didn't get any more money, he was out of money. And remember, there's a lot of, you've seen those memes of the guy digging, like mining for gold, and he's doing it for however many years. His beard grows, longer and longer and longer. And then finally what happens? He stops mining. He stops digging. And what do you see in the meme? He was literally a centimeter away, probably 2 more strikes with the pickaxe, and there was gold right there. And there's no difference in any business, including franchises. You have to be well capitalized. Well, this Wingstop franchisee wasn't, and as many of us weren't. And he ended up getting a loan from the original owner of Wingstop, an emergency loan from him. And you know what that guy's doing right now today? That was it. That's all he needed. And now he's got, 30 plus stores.
Oh, wow.
He could sell them all and probably make $10 million easy. From that start. And he didn't start with much. So I have other brands. I have many brands today that are under $100,000. I have many brands that are probably under $80,000. The SBA, the Small Business Administration, will lend typically, as long as you have a 25% down payment, they will lend you the rest. All you need is a 680 credit score. Now, if you don't have that, there's plenty of people that dip into a retirement account. One of the most common things that people don't even know, and it's been on the books for years with the IRS, is ROBS, which is an acronym for Rollover Business Loan. Forgot what the S is actually, but it's a rollover business loan. And you're pulling money out of your retirement account for the purposes of using it for a business. It has to be approved by an intermediary, and we don't have to get into that right now. I do have a podcast with the CPA, and we're going through all of that. And you put it back as you can put it back. You just borrowed it from yourself. So there's a lot of sources. I have families that pool their money. But how hard is it for most people with desire to get $80,000? Is it that difficult? Home equity.
If you get really resourceful, you could probably find it.
That's exactly right. Now, there's a lot of people I actually argue with, and I have no problem making enemies to help somebody. and there are people I argue with, and I say, you know what, Ryan or Mike, you guys are not ready for a restaurant. Restaurants are capital intense. Anything you're talking about, you need $300,000. But I hear it in your voice, and I can tell in your actions you've taken over the years that you really want to be your own boss. I get it. What I would suggest is either this brand, A, B, or C. They're all under $100,000. You start with them. You do well with them. You save your money, and after a couple of years, you could probably leverage the assets of that business to get into something else. Either sell that business or keep it. And, there are many different opportunities and ways to do that. But let me tell you a story. We have a crime scene cleanup franchise in our portfolio. And as I mentioned,
LA and Phoenix.
believe it or not, it's truly any market. And this was the crime scene cleanup was simply all mom and pops for years. It wasn't corporate, if you will. Mm-hmm. And there was a young guy that ended up cleaning up a house for a church member. The pastor asked him to go help, and this brand was founded. He founded the brand as a result of this. And he realized through franchising, he could be incredibly successful. And he's a very wealthy guy today because he sold a majority of his company to a private equity group. But my point is that brand today is $83,000 is the entire package to start. And it's essentially home-based. You do have to be an owner-operator. They don't want investors. And, there was a guy that sold his crime scene cleanup franchise that he paid $83,000 for well over $1 million. You heard me, well over $1 million. And we're not talking about waiting a lifetime of investing, $40 a month, for 40 years or whatever the number is these days. I've seen all those charts through my dad. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's great to put your money away, but there are so many ways in franchising. I have another group that it's 65,000 home-based. It's perfect through the pandemic because they call themselves vendor watchdogs. They help small and medium-sized business reduce their expenses on things like credit card processing or courier service or trash or recycling. And there are people in their documentation. Now, keep in mind, in franchising, we didn't cover this yet, but there's 23 items in a franchise disclosure document. So if you're exploring franchises, whatever franchise you're exploring, at some point in the process, when you're serious and they're serious about you, you will receive a franchise disclosure document from the brand that has 23 items. Item 19 is what's called the financial representations segment or the earnings claim. It's not mandatory that you have to claim anything. Some brands don't, for whatever reason or another. It doesn't make them bad, but you just have to do your homework. Like if you go to a restaurant and you see lines out the door 7 days a week, you can quickly start adding up. Mike, I bet you know something about the restaurant business. You're alluding to that. You can count the customers and figure out average check, right? And to go, holy cow, these guys are making money. Count the number of employees. Holy cow, they got 10 employees working. Oh, these guys are making money. But there's a lot of other ways that we could talk about on how you decide. But in a brand that has a thorough item 19, like I have a staffing company that'll tell you it's $150,000 to start. Typically, there's a range, but $150,000 average. You get a little office after you pay your franchise fee, and then $150,000 total to start. After 2 years, you should be doing $2 million a year in sales. After 5 years, you should be doing $6 million as you continue to build your business. So that is a healthy and clean and wonderful item 19. If that is the business you choose to get into, you should be able to feel pretty safe. And during the validation process with other franchisees, you just get confirmation that those numbers are real and they're happening. So hopefully
and that, I guess, is where somebody like you, a franchise consultant, would come in, right? Is to sort of help mitigate some of that risk. So, I mean, I assume you're not representing companies that, have a crappy line item.
I don't represent any companies that I think are crappy. But beauty is also in the eye of the beholder. I'll give you a perfect example. I have quite a few IV infusion, IV nutrition type brands. Wellness is huge today. And I had a nurse in New York that's looking at one of the brands. But I said, you know what, Heidi? I would suggest you and your partner check out all 3 brands that I have and compare and contrast. Because one brand has an incredibly solid leadership team and the others don't. The others don't have a deep team. They're a solid team, but they're not a deep team. So I think once you weigh all of these things, what are their number of locations that they have open? What does their menu look like? You're a nurse, Heidi. You know what you're looking for in a menu of offerings for these IV bags. Balance it all out. And I'm not exaggerating. Heidi and I probably talk 5 days a week as she's going through the process because she's processing all of this. And as you can imagine, this is like drinking out of a fire hose for some people. But I'm free. My services are free for people looking for franchises. So they pay me absolutely nothing. So the advantage of me, choose me, or, you ready for the or? Middle of the night, you're stressed out, you hate your boss, and you roll over to your laptop or your phone or whatever's closest to you, and what do? You search, be your own boss. And these franchise portals pop up, and a franchise salon comes up because it's only 150,000. You get excited and you put your information in, and then something else pops up. You put your information in. Before you know it, you have 10 different companies trying to track you down, and you're annoyed and you stop looking at your phone, or you stop, you're no longer interested and you shelve the whole idea for 6 months. They're just salesmen. They're just sharks. Well, I'm not a salesman. I don't sell anything. I just want to help people. And I have great testimonials to that point that I barely even ask for these days anymore. But I have plenty that say, oh my God, I worked with all these salesmen before. Lance just wants to help me find the right thing that's best for me. I mean, I purposely told people, no, Ryan, that is not going to be good for you. I would not do that. It's always more difficult when you have spouses involved because you got to get everybody on the same page and there's some compromise involved. So sorry, Ryan, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was going to say, I mean, it makes sense what you're saying. And I mean, for me, like I'm a person who's, at least to some degree, I mean, I'm very entrepreneurial, but I'm also sort of risk averse. Like I'm not into being too risky with the things I'm doing. So I sometimes move a little bit slow. And so for me, engaging with somebody like you, who's a consultant, who can sort of just strip away some of the layers of things that might, appear too risky for me, I think could be really valuable. So it makes perfect sense to me to use somebody like you.
Keep in mind, it's such a harmless process that I put people through. The first call, I tell people it's 15 minutes. If they're asking a lot of questions and they're very engaged, like many people are, we go as long as necessary. I block out an hour for the 15-minute call just in case. If it's just matter of fact, like some people are, it doesn't mean it's going to be somebody that's not going to get into a franchise, but some people are they've done some homework already. It's a 15-minute call, period. I have them take the assessment. Some people don't want to take the free assessment, and that's okay for whatever unusual reason. And then I get on a follow-up call within 48 hours once I do a territory check based on the brands I think that are most suited. Now, whether people are either in one category or the other. Lance, I only want a restaurant. Okay, we'll find restaurants for you. Or Lance, I want whatever you think is best for me. I heard home health is hot. Well, it is. And I'll find you a home healthcare brand that's fantastic for you. So I do the territory checks. And then the next call is sort of that discovery call of Ryan and Mike, here's what I got for you. And I typically only present 4 brands, maybe 5, because otherwise it's crazy overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And when they like what they like, I will send them the brands that they like best, or if not all of them, for their review. They do their homework. They do some Google searches on the brands. And then when they like one, I refer them to the brand and they have a first phone call with the brand. It's that simple. And some of my candidates I'm with 100% of the time. And it's by choice. Some of them like that sort of hand-holding and others don't. Others call me when they need me. Like I have a guy right now that's going to buy a wellness brand, and the brand just, reached out to me last night and said, oh, he's awesome. He's definitely buying. And I was like, well, that's funny. He hasn't returned my call yet. And he goes, yeah, he's happy as heck. And he knows. And this guy asked me, he goes, he's older than me even. He asked me, he goes, yeah, I mean, if you don't need me to call you, I'm not going to call you unless I need you. I said, that's fine, Joseph, whatever you need.
Well, I think there's other parts to the equation too that come into play with a franchise that people don't really realize. And I think it's, ordering food, for example. Like if you're trying to start a restaurant on your own, say you want to do a pizza shop, you got to source all your food from this vendor, this vendor, this vendor, this vendor. But if you decide, hey, I'm going to go with Little Caesars, they drop everything off to you in one order. Also, you got the huge marketing backgrounds that come with the franchise that, essentially you're getting rid of all the obstacles and hurdles that come along with starting a small business 100%. And just getting rid of them out the door.
100%. One of my wellness brands, while I just got that in my head, I threw that out at you guys. He has 17 different vendors. 17 different vendors. And so he brings everything in-house at cost and just ships out to the franchisees. So they have one delivery.
Do you think that by going through a franchisee, you're actually saving money on that aspect as far as like ordering the product itself?
In many cases, you will.
Okay.
In many cases, you will. And that's part of the fiduciary responsibility of the franchisor to ensure that all the costs are in line and franchisees aren't necessarily able to get a better deal on their own, if you will. things like, your Coca-Cola deal or your Pepsi deal. You're definitely getting a better deal through Coke and Pepsi in a franchise scenario because you're going to get appropriate rebates. You're going to get rebates based on gallonage of soda through this massive contract. So you're definitely getting better deals, even if it's on a rebate fashion.
Well, cool. We're almost to that point. We're about at the hour mark right now. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you and the best way to reach out?
Well, Ion Franchising, as you see behind me, ionfranchising.com is my website. I'm on Facebook and Instagram a lot, also at Ion Franchising. If you're interested, certainly go to my website and you'll see the free assessment. You can fill that out and be happy to set up a first call. But one thing I wanted to also mention that we didn't have time to cover, but I know I'll be back again for round 2 and I'll come to Salt Lake and visit you guys. But I have a webinar coming up July 2nd, and it's going to be on franchising your business. So people that own their own business, and there's plenty of those. And I was on a call with a lady the other day through a friend of mine, and she has an amazing business, an education business. And I said, do you have any idea how many successful education-related franchises that I represent? You can easily franchise your business. So she got all excited, because scaling your business to the next level through franchising when you're an independent business owner is an incredible opportunity to support your community and other business owners. So wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I'll have to tune in and check it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks so much, Lance. Like I said at the top, we really appreciate you taking the time. We know that everybody right now, especially with COVID and everything, we're all busy and everything's in upheaval and everything. So we're really grateful for your time.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Yep. And thank you to everybody who tuned in this week and every week. And you can learn more about the show, catch up with past episodes, everything else, eggscast.com. And until next time, we'll see you around.